Georgia's loaded, so nothing new there, but let's get down to the details for 2021 with Palmer Thoms from Dogs 247 Sports right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you enjoy the content, hit the like button, share the videos. Other people will enjoy it as well. They don't know that we're out here talking college football each and every day. Hit that bell for the notifications once you've subscribed as well. Palmer, let's get down to it. We appreciate you stopping by last week to break down quarterbacks, running backs, and offensive line. And we have you on here to finish up the offense and the wide receivers, of course. And Kirby and his staff have recruited out of their minds at this position as well. I guess we'll start with George Pickens. He's the guy that everybody looks to as being the number one guy. 36 catches, 6 touchdowns last year, as being, again, a guy who hasn't necessarily hit his ceiling yet, but he has sure shown us flashes.
Yeah, he's definitely shown flashes and definitely did so with JT Daniels in his 2 bigger games this season against Missouri and against Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. Like you said, Pickens finished with 36 catches. That was tied for first on the team. He only played in 8 games, though. Did miss 2 with an injury. And so, he was tied for the team lead in catches, 1 yard off of the team lead there, and had the most touchdowns over Kearis Jackson, who's another name that I'm sure we'll mention here. But, George Pickens is a player that a lot of Georgia fans are really excited to see in a second year with this Todd Monken offense, second year with JT Daniels at the helm as the quarterback, and more comfort between those two. Like I said, the 2 big games against Missouri and Cincinnati were the last 2 games of the season for Georgia, with Pickens going for 5 catches, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Tigers in Columbia, and 7 catches, 135 yards, and 1 touchdown against the Bearcats in the bowl game. He's made some spectacular catches over the years, and I think with the 3rd year in this offense, I think Georgia fans are really excited. I think most people would expect this to be his last season in red and black, but obviously crazier things have happened, and there's a possibility that he could stick around for a 4th year. But Georgia fans are really excited to see what he can do in his 3rd year as a junior.
Of course, because of the recruiting prowess, there's just droves of guys to talk about overall on the roster that performed in high school. But how does it shake out in regards to the way you see it playing out and the various skills of each guy, because they have to fit obviously into the offense and provide something different?
Yeah, I think looking at this wide receiver room, there's a lot of talent that returns. Obviously we just mentioned Pickens there, and he's the headliner. But you've got Kearis Jackson, who I mentioned earlier, had 36 catches, tied with Pickens for the team lead, led the team in yards with 514 yards, had his big outings early in the season, and slowed down as Pickens came along. But still did have some impressive outings later on in the year. Caught a touchdown against Mississippi State in JT Daniels' first game as the starter. He's back, and he's more than likely going to play the slot position again. That's kind of where he found his role in this offense. Looking on the outside, you've got Jermaine Burton, who was a true freshman this past year, had a huge game in Daniels' debut against Mississippi State. He had 27 catches, 404 yards, 3 touchdowns on the year. Big things are expected of him. Looking beyond those guys, you've got Arian Smith, who had a touchdown late in the year against South Carolina, also had a big catch against Cincinnati. He's a guy that was banged up early on, came back from the injury. I think his first game that he actually played in was against Mississippi State. But the first time that he caught a ball was against South Carolina, and it was that touchdown pass. He's a speedster. Probably the fastest guy on this Georgia roster. It's either him or Keely Ringo, Georgia's star cornerback for this next year. So Georgia's got a burner in Arian Smith. Someone that could possibly play in the slot, but certainly can use that speed on the outside. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, he was another true freshman this past year. Did get injured against Florida, had a dislocation in his ankle and a fracture as well that caused him to miss the final 4 games of the year. Very gruesome injury, but it happened on what should have been a highlight for him. It was his first career touchdown reception, got across the goal line, got hit there, and suffered the injury. He's coming along. I don't think that he'll be ready to go for spring practice. But we talked to Kirby Smart yesterday, wide receivers coach Cortez Hankton as well, and they're really high on Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Another guy who's coming off of an injury and didn't show up on the stat sheet for Georgia last year is Dominic Blaylock. But looking back 2 years ago, he was definitely a major factor. That was his freshman year. He suffered a torn ACL in the SEC championship game back in 2019 against LSU, and was coming along strongly in terms of rehab. And then in preseason camp, retore that ACL and missed the entire season. That's another guy that I would watch. It'll be interesting to see how he works in this Todd Monken offense, because he's played under James Coley. He hasn't played under Monken. But definitely someone that a veteran presence that Georgia can count on as a wide receiver.
Jackson Meeks and Adonai Mitchell would be two guys that came in the 21 class. I got to think that they're buried and they're going to be development guys for down the road, but it's got to be the first time in a long time. And not that either one of them won't turn into be an impact player of some sort, who knows, but the first time in forever that Georgia really didn't focus on the wide receiver position for a recruiting class and didn't bring in somebody or a group of players that were at the top of the board.
No, that's absolutely the case, because if you look back at that 2019 signing class, you had Pickens, you had Blaylock, and you also had Justin Robinson, who was a true freshman that year. Excuse me, the Micaiah Tongue was in that class. He ended up transferring out. Justin Robinson was in this next class, in the 2020 class, that also had featured Burton Smith and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Those four guys in that class, plus the three that were in the 2019 class. Wide receiver has really been an emphasis for Georgia, and bettering that position with some young talent. You can see the development looking, back at that 2019 season. They really relied on an older guy like Lawrence Cager. They had Tyler Simmons in there as well. But if you look at the development of that position, it's a lot more dynamic. And look, add in the tight ends too. I mean, the way that Georgia has used their tight ends this past season under Monken, you've got Darnell Washington, John Fitzpatrick. Trey McKitty was there this past season. He is gone to the NFL. But, the way that they've used their tight ends under Monken, it's a lot more dynamic. And I think that goes hand in hand with, the play of the quarterback, the play of the wide receivers, and the overall play of the offense.
We break down college football here each and every day. We would ask that you would like the videos, share them on social media, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And we definitely talk some Georgia football. We always bring in Palmer Toms from Dogs 247 Sports. You know the name, you know the brand, so check out his work right there. Palmer, I'm going to let Georgia fans know this, that if they rooted for another football team out there, they would realize that kicking's an issue with a lot of football teams across the nation, but it's typically taken care of at Georgia. You lost an All-American there, but you still hit on 13 of 16 kicks last year.
Yeah, Jack Podlesny came in, and he came in strong for Georgia. Obviously closed out the season with a statement in that with the game winner in the Peach Bowl. He was a semifinalist for the Lou Groza Award. And like you said, had an impressive season. And then looking at the punting, Jake Camarda, he was a finalist for the Ray Guy Award for the best punter in the country. Looking at All-American teams across the nation, he was the first team All-American, second team All-American, all SEC type player. So, kicking and the specialists, that's certainly something that they've got locked down with Jack Podlesny and Jake Camarda.